Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Continuing the Call, a seminary dropout's guide to discernment. Today I'm joined by Father Evan Cummings. Father Evan is a Paulist priest who's currently serving at the Church of St. Paul the Apostle in New York City. He also serves as the Associate Director of Media Ministries over at Busted Halo. Father Evan is really an expert when it comes to online evangelization. He even streams on Twitch, which is a video game streaming platform where he builds community and shares the beauty and the message of the gospel through the medium of video games. My conversation with Father Evan covers all things from his own discernment to what life in formation was like and what he's doing now as a priest. I hope you enjoy this conversation, and as you're listening, please say a prayer for Father Evan and for all the Paulists out there. And as always, most importantly, for all those men and women who are discerning God's will for their life, may we continue to support them in our prayers so that wherever they end up, they can keep encountering Christ and also serving the church and you and I. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Father Evan Cummings. Well, Father Evan, thanks so much for joining us. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll take it from there?
Sure thing. My name's Father Evan Cummings. I'm a Paulist priest. So I'm originally from Utah, born and raised, and started discerning when I was in college, and wound up joining the Paulist order and the seminary after graduating, and was ordained in May of 2019. So I'm almost at my 5-year celebration mark, which is exciting. In that time as a priest, I've served in Columbus, Ohio at the Newman Center for Ohio State, and now I'm in New York City at our mother church, St. Paul the Apostle, as well as Busted Halo, our media resource.
Awesome. Perfect introduction. You hit on all the things that I want to dive into.
All right.
Yeah, first and foremost, though, what's a Paulist priest, right? Go ahead and break down the charism, who they are, the founder, who has an amazing story. So give me the kind of insider view of who the Paulists are.
Yeah, so the Paulists, we were founded in 1858 right here in New York City. We were actually the first order of Catholic priests founded in North America. And our founder, Isaac Hecker, as you said, he has an amazing story. I love his story to death, and it was hugely impactful on me. He actually grew up in a nominally Methodist family. His parents were immigrants from Germany. And he grew up in, early 19th century America in a time when there was kind of a lot going on and a lot of change and a lot in flux. And he was trying to find his place in all of it. And he tried out working in politics for a bit, but that wasn't really quite right. He tried transcendental movements, but they were good, but still kind of missing something. He eventually found his way to the Catholic Church, and he said, if this is where I'm meant to be, I want to be a minister of this. I want to share this. So he wound up becoming a Redemptorist priest, actually, who are themselves were only about 100 years old at that time, having been founded in Italy by St. Alphonsus Liguori. And he served in the German-speaking missions in America, serving to German immigrants. But he and his companions, who were all American, said, "Hey, how about we have an English-speaking house? We do English-speaking missions, and we could do amazing things here in this country." And the powers that be were kind of like, our mission right now is really to the German immigrants. Let's focus on that. And they were like, "Okay, we respect that, but also we want to talk about this as a long-term plan." So they went off to Rome. And in the process, Hecker actually got kicked out of the Redemptorists for doing that. And so he was kind of spending 3 weeks in Rome, kind of, head over heels of like, what am I doing? What's going on? I'm not a Redemptorist anymore. In that time, he befriended a cardinal, and he wound up getting to meet the Pope, Pope Pius IX, a couple of times, and wound up getting permission to be freed from his vows as Redemptorists as well as his confreres, so they could make something new. So he came back to America and founded the Paulists. And our mission from then has really been to evangelize North America, especially through means of technology and to speak to the modern culture. One of Hecker's great lines was that in union of the American democracy and experiment and the Catholic faith, there is a future brighter than any past. That he really did see the two as, being a Catholic makes you a better American, and being an American can make you a better Catholic. And again, in the mid-19th century, that was like, no, these things are at total odds with each other. So he really was kind of very profound in saying that. So he established a printing press. They did missions all around the country. And we continue that tradition today. We actually still have the printing house, Paulist Press, biggest Catholic publisher in North America. But we've we've grown and expanded and we've responded to the needs of the age as well as the technology of the age to say, how can we share the message with this culture? How can we find that place of integration and that place of bringing true holiness to culture, calling out what we need to, of course, but also elevating what's already good. And so we've done radio production, we've done television production, we have a movie production company. We now have all sorts of internet production. So I do a lot of that with Busted Halo. So we've had a radio show on Sirius Satellite for about 20 years now. We've had the website for about a year now. I've been live streaming on Twitch to kind of evangelize the gaming side of the digital continent. And we do that in a number of ways, and we try to do that just kind of in a day-to-day way as well in the parishes we serve, where it's like, we want to elevate what's good in the culture and also help people to navigate some of the questions and the gray areas, and just really try and make America a wonderful and beautiful and Christian place.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. The whole story and the background, and it's awesome to see, rightfully so, that Father Hecker is actually moving closer and closer to canonization. So I think as of towards the end of last year, it's keeps rolling around. And it's awesome to see too when you have an order that holds so close to their patronage, right? So of course, having Paul as that great figure, and then you look at what the Paulists have done through the years, and like you're like, oh, this makes sense, right? It's one of those things that's so clear, and it's awesome to see. And one of the reasons I was so excited to chat with you is, I mean, the influence of the Paulists really can't be overstated. Like if you've seen any Catholic media, taken in any sort of print or anything to do with media and evangelization, the Paulists are either directly or indirectly related. And so it's awesome to see. So now let's talk about that in your life. Where was kind of your first encounter with the Paulists? Or I guess rather, how did you grow up? I know you grew up Catholic, but kind of in a interesting household when it comes to faith traditions. So do you want to share kind of up until your encounter with the Paulists, what Catholicism looked like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, as I mentioned, I grew up in Utah, and I was born and raised Catholic. And as you might imagine, being Catholic in Utah is not exactly a common thing, especially not in the early 90s when I was growing up. Um, I did not fully realize or appreciate what that meant though until college, or I started understanding when I was in high school, but not really understand it fully when I got to college because I went to Catholic school. My parents sent me to Catholic school K through senior year of high school. So I'm very blessed for that education and that experience. Um, but there is a sense in which you're kind of like you're aware at a certain point that you're kind of an outsider in Utah if you're not of the LDS faith. And it's odd. But by and large, they are good people. Like I'm not here to bash them by any means. They are good people. They make good community, but you're also kind of aware of like, yeah, I'm not really like in the club. Um, so that was kind of my faith experience. And, growing up, I guess faith was always there. I was very blessed that, my mom was cradle Catholic. My dad became Catholic when he was in college himself. He was raised Baptist originally, but still Christian. Um, and faith was very important to the family. That we pray before meals, we go to mass, we go to the holy days of obligation, we do special prayers during Advent and Lent. Um, and so it just always kind of made sense to be Catholic. It just there wasn't ever this grand moment of question or this grand moment of revelation. It was just always there, and I feel very blessed to have that. Um, Now, what's funny is I didn't know who the Paulists were until college, but the parish I grew up in was actually founded by the Paulists.
Wow.
We left about 2 years before I was born. But the great thing is that I grew up as an altar server, and in the sacristy there was a picture of the founding of the parish, and it was like Bishop so and so, and at the time I didn't know what any of this meant, but it was Reverend so and so C.S.P. Superior General of the Paulist Fathers. Um, Never thought to look it up. Never thought to ask a question. It was just like, cool, that's an old photo. I don't know what it means. Um, and then in
Awesome.
college, I went to study mechanical engineering. I thought the only thing I wanted to do in my life was to be a mechanical engineer, go work for NASA, go work on spaceships, do something like that. the work of engineering homework kind of convinced me otherwise, though. I was not in love with what I was doing, and I was kind of like, is this all it is? Is this all I'm going to be doing? Is this what I want to be doing? And so I started asking those kind of questions. I wasn't really getting an answer right away. So I just kind of kept going through it. But one day to avoid homework, and again, I was not consciously discerning religious life or priesthood at this point. I was just, I had the open question in my mind of what am I doing? Um, but I pulled up the list of Catholic religious orders on Wikipedia because I knew it would be long. I was not actively discerning. I just, growing up Catholic and knowing orders are a thing, but again, in Utah, there's not exactly a ton of them. I was like, okay, let's go down this list and let's avoid that strength of materials homework I really don't want to do. And I'm going down, and it's like, okay, Dominicans, sure, I've heard of them. They brought my dad into the church. Franciscans, sure, they love animals. I remember that from the VHS that they showed in Catholic school. And oh, Jesuits, okay, yep, okay. Paulist, Paulist, and I don't know what it was at the time, but it kind of got lodged in my mind, and it just got stuck there. And I think part of it was one, the digital presence that the Pauls had, that it was very well laid out, as you might expect from a group who do media, that the Wikipedia page looked good, was succinct, had good information, the website looked good. And I just kind of sat there, and it was kind of like the Holy Spirit smacked me upside the head and said, hey, this is important. This is going to be on the test. Pay attention. Um, and so I wrestled with that for a good long while, and I was like, no, 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 no. God is wrong. God is wrong. God is, it feels like God is saying maybe I should look into this, but I want to be an engineer. So, gosh darn it, I'm going to prove it. I'm going to do another semester of engineering, and I'm going to do great, and I'm going to love it. Well, I did great, but I didn't love it. So I finally kind of was like, okay, God, I'm going to sit down and stop talking for a bit, and I'll let you talk for once.
That's
So,
always a good place to be at, is when you hit that point of, okay, God, you take over and we'll see what happens.
mhm. And it was a slow process. I mean, I discovered the Paulist October of my sophomore year. I didn't actually talk to the Paulists until the end of the summer the following year. So, almost a full year after discovering it and God being like, hey, you should talk to these people. It was like, a year of active wrestling with God. But eventually, I did get in contact with the vocations director and had good initial conversations. I went out to a come and see weekend, which was really a very good experience because I was able to meet other young guys who were discerning, both those thinking about the Paulists, but also those who had already joined recently and were, around my same age and asking the same kind of questions, and being able to gain their insights and what formation has been able to help them with already. Um, and so I wound up switching my major to philosophy and um, graduated my senior year. And I was kind of at the point where it's like, you know what? If this is where I'm meant to be, why put it off? We'll give it a try. We'll jump right in. And if it's not meant for me, then that's okay. I can
Mhm.
say that I've given it a fair shake and you know that I've done it.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
here I am about a little over a decade later. So, I think
Yeah.
it was for me.
I know, absolutely. And that's awesome to see, is like, because I think that's the mindset, right? It's like there's almost like a weight lift off your shoulders when you finally just jump in and you say, all right, look, either way, there's no wasted time, right? You either
Hmm.
walk out of there, in your case, ordained and, almost 5 years into priestly ministry and all the years in the palace before that. And you're like, yeah, wow, I'm glad I jumped in. But if not, like you said, if you'd done 1 year, 2 years and you hadn't, the lessons in that also would have
Hmm.
helped propel you forward. So I love that.
Hmm.
Now, in that year or so that you said that you were wrestling, what was it? What were you kind of wrestling with? What do you think? What were the pros, the cons? I mean, was it a giving up engineering, or was it a I'm not worthy to be called a priest, or everything in between?
Um, I mean, it was a lot of things. One was, still kind of grappling with the sense of both. I love engineer, and I still do love like, you know, the idea of engineering, and like I love seeing the news of like what's going on at the ISS and what experiment NASA is doing and the James Webb Telescope and all that
Mhm.
stuff. So it was kind of wrestling with like I have this great ideal of what I love, but also the day-to-day life I am finding extremely tiring and unfulfilling, and the thought of doing that forever basically just seems insurmountable. Um, I think part of it too was that, the thought of marriage. Um, I think particularly growing up in Utah where marriage is,
Mm.
I mean, obviously in all of America, marriage is a norm, but like the culture of Utah is especially emphatic on marriage. And so that was just kind of like always in the background of like, well, I'll get, growing up, it's like, well, I'll get married one day. That's just what you do. And to kind of come to terms and be like, huh, but what if I don't? What if that's not where I'm meant to be? And that's tough. There is marriage is a wonderful and beautiful thing, and companionship is incredibly important and powerful. And to say that that's not where you're called, and you live it out in different ways, obviously, but when you're 20 and you're thinking about giving it up, that seems like the end of the world some days. Um, and that's kind of where I was at, and it was like, ooh, that's a lot. And then there was also a sense of not a sense of unworthiness in like a holy or unholy sense, but a sense of unworthiness of like, I don't have the skills. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not, I just been doing engineering, and it's like, I don't know how to write a philosophy paper or a theology paper. I don't know what any of this stuff means in any great depth, and I'm supposed to learn it. No, my mind isn't geared that way. That's not how this works. Um, and other realities too of like, what does this financially look like? Who's paying for this? Because I mean, the reality of college debt is a very real thing. Now, fortunately, my community helped with that, and that did not become a worry for me in the long term. But when you haven't spoken to anyone, everything seems to be a big deal. And that's really my first big key to people discerning is go talk to people, honestly. You know, you have questions, and you know what? They do seem insurmountable sometimes, and it's okay to feel that they're insurmountable. You know, good Lord knows I felt that way. But if we just stay there by ourselves, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to take forever to process through that. If you go and talk to people, you can kind of get a bit more of the concrete, and you can get a bit more of a sense of what it's like on the ground and say, oh, okay, this makes more sense. These patterns uh follow, and help answer some of my questions. So, and I'm thankful that that's what I did when I reached out to the vocation director. I went to the Cummings C weekend.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up because I think that those questions are a bigger hurdle than people realize. I mean, I remember when I was telling my parents that, hey, I think I'm supposed to be a priest. I'm going to go to seminary. My fear wasn't that conversation. Like that part was easy to me because in some sense I knew that they knew, right? Like, when you get to that point and you're kind of accepting it, like most people around you who love you and care for you usually know like, oh, this is probably where they're going.
Hmm.
So that conversation didn't terrify me at all. But what terrified me was like, I didn't have the answer to their questions, right? Like being the good parents that they were, I knew that they're going to ask is, well, who's paying for it? How do you even become a priest? Where do you go? Are you going to college? Like all of these questions, and the anxiety of not having an answer to those right away, um, was like one of the biggest hurdles. So I'm glad you bring that up. Of like, yeah, get the information, talk to people, and like having the information and knowing those things, you're not signing your life away, right? Like
Hmm.
that, those all happen before you even walk in the door of the seminary, and like so get those conversations rolling, get them out of the way. Um, and I, actually, now that I'm reflecting on parents, I saw your parents actually were kind of an instrumental part, obviously in your initial discernment, but even while you're going through, do you want to share a little bit about their kind of apostolate and how they've helped so
Yeah,
far?
absolutely. Yeah. So my parents, like, any parent, I think, in this kind of situation, have those kind of questions. Who's paying for it? What can I visit my child? Can I, do they still have their cell phone? Things like that. And so my parents established a blog called Seminarian Parents, and it was basically reflections and practicals kind of in parallel with my formation and my journey. So like a lot of the early years of my formation experience, they had blog posts about just that. Who pays for it? How much does it cost? Where does that come from? What does will my will my son be taken care of if they become a priest? And then as I got farther along, as a lot of those practicals were answered, that it transitioned more into a spiritual reflection of what does it mean to have a son who's becoming a priest? What does it mean to have a child who's becoming a religious? How can you love and support them uniquely in that, beyond just obviously, the fact that they're your child. Um, and so now there's basically just like this dossier from beginning to end, and whatever question you have, hopefully there's some sort of answer in that website. Obviously they haven't been updating it lately because they aren't seminarian parents anymore, but it still exists as a great resource, and they still get good traffic to it, and occasional emails thanking them for having that information out there.
That's awesome. No, it's beautiful. And yeah, like you said, I mean, that's one thing that whether they're updating it regularly or not, that's the definition of evergreen content right there. Like the Lord is going to
Hmm.
keep calling priests. And it's awesome to see that there's something for the parents. Because, yeah, I think that that is such a, like, you know, underappreciated role, right? The parents of priests and seminarians. And because there is, it's like, you want to help, but it's like, I don't really know how to help in this situation. So, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
and my parents found themselves basically doing it out of frustration on a certain level because they're like, okay, our son is thinking of becoming a priest. Let's go to Google. Let's find out what we can. How do we support our son becoming a priest? Pray for them. Okay, good. What else? Pray for them.
Yep.
Okay, we'd like maybe a little more. So out of frustration of like the only answer that they could find. And again, prayer is incredibly important and powerful. I'm not
Mhm.
dismissing it in any way, shape, or form. But they were like, we also have practical questions that prayer cannot answer.
Yep.
Okay, we're going
Yeah.
to answer them ourselves and give these answers out then, which
That's
itself is
awesome.
an answer to a prayer.
Yeah. Hey, that's all good apostolates and ministries. Most of them come out of a sense of frustration or, hey,
Hmm.
well, this resource isn't here, so I'm going to make it myself. So now making that switch from engineering to philosophy, and I imagine a little bit of theology, even if it was just kind of as a hobby, right, diving into it. What was that like?
Hmm.
Because on paper they look really different, and obviously, my brain lives in the philosophy, theology, English side of things, not in any of the math and numbers side. So in my head, they couldn't be any more different. But what was that transition like? I mean, did you find a love for philosophy, or how was that kind of shift taking place?
Yeah, I actually really did find a love for philosophy, and I still do love philosophy. Um, I think on one hand, we do have the sense of like, oh, hard sciences, and then kind of out there, all thinking philosophy. It's like, well, actually, at the core, philosophy is just logic.
Mhm.
Like you start from a principle supposition and you kind of just flesh it out. And so in that sense, the engineering actually served me very well when it came to papers because it's like, cool, I have to construct an argument. That's just like constructing a proof. You start with your givens, you make your argument, you find your variables, boom, you're done. Um, the actual practical application was very different in many ways, but that's one of the things I really loved in the end. Where I went to school, Utah State, it's a great engineering school, but classes were 300 people, so you don't get to know anyone. Like I went to class with my roommates, which was a lot of fun, but like I didn't meet anyone else, and didn't really feel like I had a relationship or a peer network or anything. So when I switched to philosophy, at a school of probably 25,000 students, there were 42 who had either a major or a minor in philosophy.
Wow.
That was it. So we were very small, very tight knit. And I think that really helped in a great sense because we had that peer network and we could go to each other and be like, I do not understand what Hume is talking about. Please help me get this. Work. Can you help me out? And we really did look out for each other. It wasn't competitive in any way. It wasn't who got better on the test or the paper. It was like hey, what kind of weird subject are you writing on for your paper? And we'd play bowling. And so I really found community there, honestly, is what I found, which I didn't have in philosophy or in engineering. But I also just found a great love of that sense of just asking those questions and kind of seeing where they go. But also sometimes being willing to that willingness to ask a question and be like, huh, I have no idea, and I'm okay with that, and it's incredibly frustrating to the engineering side of me because it's like, no, we have to have an answer. We have to know exactly what this thing is made up of, or how much delta V it has. But the philosophy side is like, you know, it's
Yeah,
all there's a vague shape. It's all I got,
yeah,
you know. So I did
yeah.
really wind up loving philosophy, and it was also helped because two of my professors, again, there were only six professors in the
Wow.
philosophy department. So again, we all had a very great relationship with the professors. And they'd go out to the bars with us and talk philosophy. But two of them were Catholic, and so I actually wound up doing independent
Mm.
study with them, where I was technically doing philosophy, but it was kind of like philosophy of theology. So it's like an intro to theology, which was a lot of fun and a great way to prep myself for seminary. So
Hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. The overlap is, you can try to divide it as much as you want, philosophy, theology, but at the end of the day, like they're always asking that question. And it's nice when you have those resources of, because it can go in so many different directions, but when you have those good Catholic touchstones of, with the philosophical background and the
mhm.
conversation kind of seamlessly flows into it. Um, so now take me through formation. What was that like? So you're out of college and now you're, in Paulist formation. What
Mhm.
does their particular formation look like?
Yeah, so our formation, like any other religious community, starts with a novitiate. We don't do a postulancy because, for canonical reasons, we don't have to. So we're kind of like,
Nice.
well, let's just do the novitiate and do all of that formation there, which works well for us. So we do a 1 year novitiate, and that's at Washington D.C. at our House of Studies. In the early 2000s, we used to have a separate novitiate, but we decided in the early 2000s because of smaller numbers and maintaining a physical site and all that to close the New Jersey place, but also to combine it in with the DC house. And I think that's actually a blessing for us because then you have guys who are in temporary profession, kind of looking out for the new novices and being like, hey, we're going to show you the ropes. We're gonna help you. Um, so I really appreciate that. But the novitiate was really a year of study and prayer and light ministry, just to kind of see what it's like, live with the community, see if it was a good fit, learn about the history, the spirituality, what it means to be a priest today. Um, we helped out at a food bank and a Little Sisters of the Poor retirement home. We'd go and visit people. That was kind of our ministry. So, nothing like super intensive, but still a good experience of both serving the poor and serving, those who are kind of homebound and in need of companionship. Um, and then at the end of that year, we made our profession. And then we do 2 years of study in theology, three if you need to do some philosophy. We study at Catholic U, which is a great experience because, A, great professors by and large, and B, the fact that it wasn't just us.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
the Diocesan Formation House, Theological College. There's the Paulist Formation House. There's the Dominican Formation House, the Capuchin Formation House, the Conventual Formation House. The Benedictine Monastery is there. The Oblates of St. Francis de Sales are there. Um, I think there's a couple other. Oh, Marianists are there.
Mm.
Um, there's a Maronite seminary that studies there. So we have all this diversity of spirituality and background and views and locations. Um, so that when we got into pastoral discussions in class over, how do you handle this? We really did get some great different views of like, okay, well, this is how, someone in Texas would handle it versus this is how someone in Maine would handle it versus,
Yeah.
you know, a Franciscan in California would handle it. And kind of getting that great uh, perspective and just seeing like what can we draw from all of this. After that, we do a pastoral year. So we spend 1 year working in one of our parishes or foundations, working full time, and that's a great experience because it's really that kind of practical of, is this the kind of life I think I want to live? So I spent my year at UC Berkeley at the Newman Center at the Holy Spirit Parish. Great experience working with the students and working with the resident community there. And it really did help with a lot of those, like, what does daily life look like? Because seminary is not what a priest's life looks like. Um, so then it was back to seminary for 2 more years of study. And in your final year with the Paulists, you make your final profession. So you promise to be a Paulist for life. And the very next day, you get ordained to the diaconate. And then you finish out your academic year. And at the end of that, you get ordained a priest. And then you get sent on your way and head out into the world.
Yep, and then it's a whole new world, and yeah, you're right. That's
And you
always the funny
relearn
bit.
everything.
Yep, absolutely. So now, when you're going through that, right, all those years of formation, what are some of the confirmations that you're getting of, hey, I'm in the right place, right? Like Father
Mhm.
Evan is more and more clear, and I can see that. I can see the black and the collar and all of that. Um, and then what are some of the things that you're like, I don't know, Mr. Evan Cummins sounds really good right now. And what was kind of the conversations internally going on that were kind of between the two?
Yeah, oh, that's a great question. I think one for the confirmations, it's going to be internal and external, and that sounds like I'm saying everything, but it's not. Internally, are you at peace with it? Was I at peace? And I would say most days I was there. Obviously, no life is perfect, and there are days where I was like, am I sure this is really what I want to keep doing? Um, but by and large, finding that sense of peace, that sense of joy, and saying, okay, yeah, in the midst of all the craziness and all the hecticness, the stressfulness, I still want to get out of bed and do this in the morning. Um, so that's an important thing to pay attention to. And also internally, that sense of, you know, what is my sense of the Holy Spirit within me? Is this helping me resonate and find the presence of the Holy Spirit within myself, and be fruitful in a life of prayer and ministry? Or is it creating a wall? Or is it obfuscating? Or you know, am I doing this because it looks like I'm being prayerful, even though I'm not? And that's a real question sometimes you have to
Mhm.
ask. Um, and then sort of external is, are the people of God saying good things about you? And not in a sense of, try and build up, um, you know, people surrounding you only saying positive things, but like genuinely, you know, are the people of God happy and thankful that you are there? Are they, do they appreciate what you're doing? Do they appreciate, uh, you know, the, uh, the content, for lack of a better word, that you're producing? And are they, being fed by that? Is it helping them to grow closer to God? And you can, by the time you're on a pastoral year, I'd been with the Paulists from novitiate on for about 3 years already. So like, novitiate, maybe those questions were a little bit harder, but by the time I was in a pastoral year, and especially later in seminary, and even now, it's like, okay, I know how to answer these questions and look for these answers. And see that, yeah, this really is a good thing, and that it is resonating. The Holy Spirit is present in me, is present in others, and is elevating what's going on. So
hmm Yeah, no, I'm glad you bring that up, right? And I think that like the parallel, right, is in the dating world, right? If you're going out and like every date you go on is a disaster, or like, you're out and it's, obviously the dating world is a bit of a struggle, but like you
sure.
start to get a sense of things that like you're like, oh, maybe I should work on this, or hey, maybe I should adjust the approach. And like I think people forget that it's seminary formation, religious formation is the same way of you don't just like show up and get married, right? Like no, there's a
Hmm.
dating and discernment process, and the beauty of it on the religious and seminary side is it's both sides, right? Like not only is it the individual discerning, but also it's the church and the order discerning that individual.
Hmm.
And it's one of the beautiful things, right? And I think that that's where you get a lot of harmony because both sides are saying, "Hey, is the Spirit working here?" Um, Now, take me through the day of your final profession and ordination. What were those days like?
uh Bit of a blur, to be honest.
That's fair.
um
That's a good answer. That's probably the right answer, right? Because then,
yeah.
like, you're there and
so
you're present.
so final profession was on a Friday, August 31st, and or diaconate was September 1st. So unfortunately, like the whole week leading up, I was in class, and
Hmm
like, it's it was like the second week of the semester, so it wasn't just like the syllabi. It was like, oh, I actually have homework I need to be doing. Um, and so, you're really focusing on that, and you want to be all in on prayer, getting ready for this. You're like, nope, life is also happening. But and then families arriving, and so a lot going on, and it was a bit chaotic, but it was also beautiful. And it was intense. Like I remember I was nervous isn't quite the right word, but I was very overwhelmed with what I was saying and what I was doing when I made my final profession. And part of it was I was doing it alone. So I was the only one in my class to make final profession that year. And so I was standing up there reading the promise out loud to a chapel full of people. My hands were shaking a little bit. It's like, oh, this is a lot to take in. This is and I imagine, you know, it's probably how married people feel, especially guys when they see their soon to be wife coming down the aisle to the altar. I've seen guys cry and hands shake. It's probably a very similar feeling of, wow, this is
Yep.
amazing. This is beautiful. Oh my gosh, this is overwhelming and
Yeah.
intense.
Like,
You
I
know.
don't want to run, but I feel like running, but it's a good kind of run, that
hmm
that sort of sense. Yeah.
hmm So that was it was good. And then great meal afterward, and just getting to say hi to so many people who had been part of my journey and thank them. And then the next morning to go to the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, and be ordained a deacon there alongside other religious. So there were two Marianists and one Franciscan, and I'd been in a lot of classes with the Franciscans, so we went way back. Um, and so just really, honestly, a beautiful, moving experience of the presence of the Holy Spirit. Um, like especially during the Litany of the Saints, I could definitely feel the presence of the Holy Spirit there. Um, and again, just great joy getting to go out and be with family and afterward and celebrate and also go take a nap. Um, it was a beautiful weekend, but also just kind of a lot, so it kind of made it a bit of a blur. And then 9 months later was priestly ordination, and we do that at our mother church here in New York, which is a stunning church. I think it is my favorite church in all of Christendom. Um, but just to be there and to have that spiritual connection where it's like, how many generations of Paulists have been ordained
Yeah.
priests here? How many Paulists have celebrated Mass here? The fact that our founder lived there and celebrated Mass there, to have that spiritual connection, to pray at his tomb before the ordination and ask for his intercession in my ministry. Um, just truly a beautiful communal event. And then the number of people of the parish who showed up, because they're very supportive of the Paulist, but also the fact that I had served there the summer before as a seminarian. So like I knew a ton of people. And so
Hmm.
when they found out when it was, they were all there. Um, so it was a full house. And again, just kind of that beautiful, amazing moment of, it was very joyful. I think diaconate I would describe almost more as sublime, whereas priestly I would just describe more as exuberantly joyful. It was really just again awe-inspiring to stand at the altar for the first time as a priest and celebrate, um, but just to have that presence of the Holy Spirit. And Cardinal Dolan ordained me, and every year on my anniversary, I actually go back and rewatch the video of it so I
Hmm.
could listen to the homily. Just I don't watch the whole thing
Hmm.
because it's like 2 hours long, but I do watch the homily every year on my anniversary because he had a beautiful message say that um, that continues to speak to me and to my identity as a Paulist. He drew in on Hecker, and so it was really beautiful. And then the next day to preside at Mass for the first time as a priest um, was amazing. And I remember our we had the presider chalice pretty full. Uh, and I remember at the doxology, at the elevation of the gifts, I'm holding them up and I'm so nervous, my hands are shaking. And all I'm thinking at this point is, it's like, okay, I got to get through the lines, through him and with him and in him. And I want to make it look good because it's my first mass, but also my hands are shaking, so I got to be careful so I don't spill any of the precious blood. That would be bad. So it was kind of a lot of like just the overwhelming awe of getting to preside at mass, and also the nervousness of this is my first time. Ah!
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Because yeah, I think yeah, it's one of those things. It's like those are the moments, right? Like those are people, right? We look at the priest, and and we think, oh yeah, they got ordained one day, but yeah, it's like that's your wedding day, and that's the day that not only your wedding day, but what you've spent years and years and years in formation waiting for, right? Like that's
Hmm.
the goal. And then you realize that, oh, this isn't the goal. This is just the one step. And then you wake up the next day and have mass and confessions, and you realize, oh, it's just starting. Um, but it's beautiful to hear you reflect on that. And yeah, the fact that you go back and reflect on it and listen to the homily is, I think, it's so important because, yeah, it's awesome to see that, you know, as a parishioner and someone who relies on priest, it's humbling to hear that and know that, oh, hey, my shepherd cares that much about his call as a shepherd, that it means that much. So thank you for doing that, from
Hmm.
a parishioner to a priest.
Of
Um,
course, thank you.
yeah. So now take me through what's the life of the priest like, and you get there, and now you're in no quiet place for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, you're in the thick of it. What's the life of a priest in New York City like?
Yeah, I'm in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. It's, we were a block from Columbus Circle and the Lincoln Performing Arts Center. We're in an amazing location. And we have an amazing community that worships with us, and we're very blessed to have that. Uh, Day to day can be all over the place because we do daily mass at both 7:30 and 12:10, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays we do confessions after the mass as well. So, just now the the blessing is that, here at the mother house of the community, the headquarters, we have about 20 guys in the house. Now, obviously, many of them are retired and not really physically in an ability to celebrate mass. One of our guys is 102, and it's a blessing to have him, but he legitimately cannot stand to celebrate mass. Um, but he's still present to the people. Um, so, you're not overwhelmed and inundated. It's not like you're doing both masses every single day for a week. But your schedule can be pretty in flux because one day you'll be scheduled for the 7:30, and then the next day the 12:10, and then the next day nothing, and then the next day the 7:30 again. Um, and so there's not really like a set daily schedule. We have morning prayer at the house at 8:45 every day, where we do, just liturgy of the hours, and we try to gather at 5:45 before dinner for some just some common time, watch the news, and then dinner's at 6:15. Anything in between is basically fair game, and find what you can when you can, because sometimes I'll have meetings with parishioners or um, projects to work on, obviously homilies to write, marriage prep cases to be working on. Do a lot of that in the evening. I work with the young adult group in the parish, which is fantastic. They're called Apostolist, and they meet every Wednesday, so that's pretty regular. But other days it's like, last night we did a Mardi Gras party, and so that was just a random extra event on a Tuesday. A lot of fun though. I cooked about 150 pancakes, so we had a good time.
Geez, yeah.
Um, but then also I'm working with Busted Halo, so I also have to navigate the reality of like fitting in the work I do over here in the Busted Halo office, and the media work I'm doing. And like I mentioned earlier, I stream on Twitch 3 days a week, and so I have 3 periods blocked out each week, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday from 2 to 4 Eastern time, where it's like I am not scheduling anything because this is when I'm making my content. This is
Mhm,
when I am going live. I cannot change that
mhm,
unless there's a literal emergency. Um, so I just, but again, then I also have to work around that and be like, okay, where does the homily work go? Where does the this go? And, it's very fluid, and you don't necessarily try and have a strict schedule that looks the same every day, but you kind of just respond to the needs and to the needs of yourself. I'd set out time to be like, okay, this is when I'm going to exercise, and some days that's first thing in the morning when I get up. Sometimes it's not until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but
mhm,
you get you fit it in there, and it's important stuff because it all works together. Because self care is important, and so that you can give of yourself to others.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. No, and I'm glad that it's funny to hear. It's good that chaos keeps you young, keeps you on your toes, and
Yep.
keeps you fresh. Now, I'm glad you brought up both Busted Halo and Twitch, but let's dive into the Twitch streaming a little bit.
Hmm.
Share a little bit about, I guess, kind of what it is, right? I
Sure.
imagine that now it's kind of a commonplace, but for some people who may not know what Twitch is, and then also why you feel that's important, right? Given that a lot of this conversation is on discernment, how did
Hmm.
you discern that, hey, this is something that I think the Spirit's leading me to? And what are some of the fruits you've seen from it?
Hmm. Yeah, so Twitch, for those who don't know, is a live streaming platform geared towards gaming. It's not exclusive for games, but its culture is predominantly around video games and all of that. Um, and I think what I was discerning was really one, uh, I have a natural affinity for that. I grew up playing video. I literally don't remember life without video games because my parents owned them before I was born. And so it's just been a very natural part. And I've hung out on Twitch. I've been a part of that culture. It's kind of in that hacker question of like, how can I combine faith and culture here? What can be brought together? And I found a need because I found a few priests who were live streaming. Um, Most notably, of course, his name escapes me as soon as I Father Bill Kessler, and he's a great guy. He's a priest in Indiana. Um, but he doesn't really do it as a ministry. He does it more as a hobby, and that's totally fine. Like I'm happy he does that. And he does it in collar, and he's very clear of like, I'm a Catholic priest. I'm not gonna apologize for that. But he's not doing it as like a, you know, where is faith in this? So I found a need of like, there's a lot of great stories in games. There's a lot of great messages. Obviously there's problematic stuff, there's questionable stuff, but there's also great stories and ways that we can critically engage the media we consume. So, what if I, instead of looking for something to fill that void, why don't I help fill that void? Um, and so I set out a proposal to our leadership and basically breaking down, like the importance of, hey, look, just the ways we create, movies and television and radio, this is the new content, and none of us are making it right now. Um, I'm really well equipped to do this from the gaming side. I already have all that equipment and personality and culture. And three, there are a lot of people on this platform. There are several billion people on this platform that we could reach and cultivate relationships with and help them to see the presence of the Holy Spirit in the media they consume. And how much has that been a part of our ministry already? And they agreed and uh, allowed it to. They greenlit it, and I'm really thankful for that because it's been a really fun experience. Um, some people joke that it's like, you know, a dream job because I got to play video games as a priest. And it's like, well, you're not entirely wrong,
Yeah.
but it's also been really powerful to look at some of these stories and see what's going on and the images and the meaning that we're finding behind them and the conversations I've had. I had a really good conversation with someone who, they openly said, "Hey, I'm a Calvinist. This is the background I'm coming from. I'd like to learn more about, you know, Catholicism and baptism by desire. I've heard of this thing, but what is it? What does it mean? How do you theologically argue for this?" We had a very good discussion for about an hour, and I'm on a microphone, and they're just texting in a chat room. We're still having this very fruitful conversation. So it was really beautiful to do that. But then also to look at the games again. So one game I'm playing right now is called Spiritfarer,
Mhm.
and in that you play a character who is a psychopomp. That is to say, someone who ferries souls from death into the afterlife. And it's a beautiful game because you're on this boat and you're kind of taking care of them. You're feeding them. There's a um, very pastoral reality of like taking care of their needs, but you're also helping them process what happened in their life and in their death, um, so that they can be at peace to enter into heaven. So it's very, honestly, it's very much like purgatory in some sense. I feel like it's a great metaphor for purgatory, and it's a great way of culturally looking at death and how we understand it, and you know, looking at both the reality of mourning, but also the reality of the resurrection and joy. And so that's been a really meaningful experience. And that's just one game that I've played.
Hmm. Yeah, no, and I love that you touch on the fact of, yeah, the stories are there, right? Like I think we think of video games and like movies, right? Like some of them are, just it's
They're
what you see is
vapid.
what you get. Yeah. But no, some of them are deep, right? I think of,
Hmm.
there's that story, there's a rather famous YouTuber who he met the Pope, right? I forget through what dicastery for what thing, but he gave him a copy of, I believe it was Undertale, I think,
Hmm.
with that same premise of like, hey, here, this what looks like just a simple video game has all these deeper levels to it, and yeah, I'm glad that you're somebody who's looking at it and saying, hey, the Spirit's working in this, and we can take this out, right? Find the beauty, find the virtues that are in this, and why are they so popular, right? Like, why is this
Hmm.
game drawing in so many people? It's like, well, because it's speaking to something in our souls and who we are, and it's just just like you have people who communicate through music, through words, through poetry.
Hmm.
Video games are just another medium that now it's looking like I think more and more people are starting to realize that of, hey, this is, whether it's helpful for making analogies or metaphors, there's something true there. And yeah, it's good to have somebody on our side capitalizing on that, saying, hey, let's dive into this.
Hmm. Yeah, and
Um,
it's been a great experience of building up community too.
yeah.
Not just in my chat, but like through doing this, I have found another number of other streamers who identify as Catholic on their like bios or whatever, and all lay people, and it's fantastic to see, the lay body of the church doing that kind of thing and representing the church in a positive way, and to build up relationships with them, hang out in their chats, they hang out on mine, and do collaborations together, um, and to sort of build up that network of community of like, look, you don't have if you're online as a Catholic, you're not alone. Like there are other Catholics out there and ways to be together. So that's been a real blessing as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you point that out, right? And this is something that I've just heard from our conversation. Is there's almost a beauty of that kind of spirituality being present through your entire life of, you mentioned growing up Catholic in Utah and Mormonism, right? Of being that like, hey, I'm kind of on the outside, not really on the outside, but like, oh, there's just like, it's this kind of interesting reality where like, hey, well, the people around me don't necessarily believe the same thing. It's obviously the same in ministry and there as well of like Catholics are always in this weird place, especially I think here in America, which again ties it back to Father Hecker of like, what does it mean to be Catholic, right? It's like we're meant to be universal, we're meant to evangelize, but then there is a sense of like, hey, we are kind of exclusive in the sense of who we are, and it is something you have to be like baptized into and brought into. Um, so it's that beautiful kind of dance between being all things for all people, but then also holding on to who we are and being independent enough to have something to bring people into. So it's
Hmm.
beautiful sort of spirituality that has come up in this conversation. I can see it through that. Um, Real quick, I want to end with you've done a lot of work in campus ministry and with young adults and young people, which
Hmm.
is kind of that key discernment age. What's your advice for discernment for young people and for people of all ages, but discerning life's big questions, obviously state of life vocations, but just in general, what's your biggest piece of advice for somebody saying, I want to help God, I want to serve God, I want to respond to his love. How do I do it?
Yeah. As I said earlier, I think my biggest piece of advice is honestly talk to other people, talk to your friends and your family that you trust about what's going on internally. If you have questions about religious life or priesthood, go talk to a vocations director. That's the job of a vocations director is to help you in that discernment. Their job is not to get you to sign up as quickly as possible. Like their job is to help you find what ultimately fits. Um, Try it out. If you're at a place where you've been discerning for a while and you're kind of on the fence, try it out. Worst case scenario, what? You walk away and say, well, that life isn't for me, but I've learned some wonderful life lessons. Seems pretty good to me.
Hmm.
Um, and ultimately, just continue to cultivate your relationship with God. I think to say pray is perhaps a little obvious, but be intentional about your prayer. Be intentional about going to mass. Try to make going to daily mass a thing more regularly, or participation in confession, or some way of just deepening your spirituality and listening to that indwelling presence of the Holy Spirit. So those kind of be my top pieces of advice.
Awesome. I love it. It's beautiful. No matter how many conversations like this I have, there's always that, right? It's always that underline. It comes back to that of, prayer, community, sharing. And it's beautiful because it speaks the truth to it of like, at the end of the day, it's like the God who made us is the God who loves us and is the God who gives us our vocation. So if you know that God and you trust that God, like wherever you end up is where you're supposed to end up. So,
Mm-hmm.
thank you for sharing that. And it's awesome to see. And, I could keep you here all day, but I know that there's a lot of people in your busy city who need you
More work to
probably
be
a little bit
done.
more. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Father, if people want to follow you along on this journey and get some of your awesome insights, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at FR as well as on Twitch at FR Uh, I'm live Monday, Tuesday, Thursday from 2 to 4 Central Time, but you can also find my contact info on the About page at bustedhalo.com, or the church, stpaultheapostle.org contact us page. So I have many emails, many hats.
Yeah, it's good. A lot of ways to reach you.
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, yeah, no, I can't echo it enough of like, if you haven't checked out Busted Halo, a lot of their stuff is great. I used so many of the infographics and all the different things when I was teaching. So yeah, I commend you on that content that y'all are putting out because it's just good. It's just quality, right? Like, and that's one of those things, as you mentioned it when you looked at the Paulist and you said, huh, their Wikipedia page, their website is nice. It's appealing to look at. I want to learn more. That's definitely continuing through Busted Halo. So thank you for that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You're most welcome, and glad to hear you're using those resources.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Father Evan, it's been a pleasure, and I can't wait to see your ministry continue and hope that one day, next time in this city, I'll definitely swing by and hopefully have this conversation in person.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. Thanks, Father. Take care.
God bless.